Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Well, everybody, I wish I could say happy Saturday. Normally, I would say happy Saturday. And it was a happy Saturday until about 10 minutes ago when the Leafs fell in Boston to the Bruins. 4-3. Matt Grzelcyk getting the dagger with 47 seconds to go. I really thought we were going to make it to overtime.
Like that team, that Boston Bruins team, I say it every stream, they have made some deal with the devil. They are so good. They're so just
good
done
this
something.
Year. They're so hot right now.
Like, I can't even hate the team anymore. Like, I'm just like, I just respect you. It's like Anchorman when Vince Vaughn goes to Will Ferrell. It's like, I hate you, but damn it, I respect you. And it's just like, they're just so good. Man.
They're so good. They played so well.
Just line after line. Yeah. All four lines. They were buzzing. I mean, the Leafs.
They showed us why they're first in the league, right? They got the number 1 PK, number 3 power play.
First in the league. They're first in they're in another league. They're in their own version of the NHL at this point.
There's a reason why they're number 1 in the division. There's a number 1 why they're number 1 in the conference and the league. And we're going to talk about it tonight. We're going to talk about it. And not only are we going to talk about that, we have a very special guest for you guys tonight in the chat.
We do.
We have got sorry. I have too many notes. We have national best-selling author Wab Rice waiting to come on to talk about the game, to talk about Indigenous sport and hockey and Indigenous people in hockey. And we are happy to have him. We are happy to have you, Leaf fans. And before we get going on that, we're going to say thank you to our sponsor. Thank you. Know it's going to go. Make your bet with Sports Interaction. Whether it's hockey, football, or basketball, Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, live and play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all that sports betting has to offer. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Our friends in the chat, please put your cyber hands together for our very special guest, Wabijeg Rice. Welcome, my friend.
Welcome on. We're sorry we brought you on for a heart-crushing loss. That's the breaks, right?
Perfect timing. You know, I am happy to be here regardless.
Yes, of course. Well, I thought, though, it's one of those games where, obviously as Leafs fans, Leafs homers, that we're going to feel the pain of that loss. But, man, was that a good hockey game. That was just a great game between two amazingly good teams. Let's be honest. The Leafs are a very good team, despite what the haters may say.
Yeah. Oh, it was just so fun to watch it go back and forth. And I took a little comfort in knowing that it's just like halfway through the season and not actually the playoffs yet, because cardiovascularly, I don't think I could handle that quite yet. I'm going to mentally prepare myself for that too, But a good game nonetheless. It was a lot of fun in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is too bad that the curse of having a guest continues, where statistically speaking, when we have an exciting guest on, the Leafs end up losing. It gives us lots to talk about though, right? Because everybody knows that Leaf fans, we somehow love pain. So we're glad to have you on tonight. Again, we're sorry for that we couldn't bring you a Leafs win. Normally we have a little bit more energy tonight, but let's talk about the game. Who do you think was the best player tonight? Who do you think was the best player tonight, Wab?
Oh, geez, always like Marner. He was shaky here and there on some of those entries, but he's a guy who's always all over the ice. That actually, the second Leafs goal by Engvall was pretty sweet. That wrister from a little ways out, right? And he put on some pressure later on too, and he was going for some more of those more aggressive, I think, entries too. So Engvall was pretty great tonight too.
Yeah, Engvall apparently just channeled the soul of Austin Matthews with he wheeled back and sniped it. I looked for a second. I had to go like that. Wait a second, was that Pierre Engvall who just did this stretchy stick and just wailed it on the net? That was a great one. He's had a couple goals this season where I've gone like, Engvall, where'd that come from? Like, sometimes he's one of those players that can be invisible for 10 games, but will all of a sudden score an absolute beauty.
Yeah.
It was definitely one of those I'll do it fine, I'll do it myself moments, right?
Yeah.
Like he gets control of it in his own zone, brings it up through the middle, and then 15 feet into the zone is just like, I'm just gonna bomb it and see what happens. And lucky enough to get a goal. That was it put them up 2-1, right? Beginning of the second, gets them all full of juice. And unfortunately they couldn't capitalize on that because right after that, Pasternak comes in to even it. Oh my god.
The perfection line. They call them the perfection line for a reason. I mean, you saw the first goal by the Bruins where where it was Bergeron to Marchand.
Yes.
And I looked at it, I'm like, these guys know each other more than their families know them. They share a brain at this point. Like I was just like, wow. Like
that giveaway by Timmins on that goal too was rough. But I mean, you got to be a young guy and make those mistakes once in a while, right?
It was his worst game, I think, so far, right? Like, he came in after having the last couple games off. Everybody was crying for him to be put up with Morgan Rielly. And, at the end of the second, Morgan Rielly was a -3. And they ended up splitting that defensive pairing up because it didn't end up going as well as we had all hoped that it would.
-3.
All hoped it would. And it was, again, like you said, it was hard to see. And when you are a young defenseman, you are going to make mistakes like that, right? It's just an inevitable thing. But boy, don't I wish it was against someone other than Boston. They they get 2 more points away from us, and the reality that is sort of looming over, I think, the rest of the season is the inevitability of Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round again.
Yeah, it's not going to be an easy path here, guys. Like no matter what happens, it doesn't matter. Like the Leafs are not going to have an easy road to win the cup if they want to win the cup. Like you're a novelist, so like if you were writing this novel, you would write it to have the strongest possible foes for this hero of the Leafs team to go through the strongest possible opponents. But that's what it's going to have to be. It's going to have to be a storybook win. If they do
exactly.
So.
Yeah, it's going to be more dramatic than anything else. But like in this case with the Leafs, having to face Boston at some point, but also inevitably Tampa Bay, it's like Lord of the Rings, but battling Sauron first, like getting to the Eye of Sauron before everything else, and then hopefully it'll be easier after that. But it's just like the drama is like embedded into the Leafs themselves. It's just part of their history and their identity, and we as fans got to suffer who have no control whatsoever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as much as yelling at the TV, I think it's going to make the players shoot the puck more accurately. Sometimes I have to realize probably not. But we have some Boston. We have a Boston fan in the chat, like being very gracious. Thank you, Brian Robinson. Wow, what a great game! Would love to see the playoff series with these two teams again. Of course, you would like to see that series, Brian.
I mean, it is poetic, right? Wob, like, is there a better redemption arc than to face Boston after all this time?
I think it has to happen. It's like, slaying the dragon finally in order to get over that hump. Who knows who would come after that? But yeah, it has to be Boston poetically, as you said, Lauren, for sure.
Well, and like you said, Lord of the Rings, if you started from the Return of the King and just worked backwards,
yeah,
it would be quite something to watch. Although it both ends up in Hobbiton, so it's all fine. But
there you go. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think that the redemption story has to go through Boston. I think if the Leafs won the cup without facing Boston, it would almost be like that would be the next thing that every other non-Leafs fan would hang to. Oh, well, you still have to beat Boston in the playoffs, right? Yeah. I think that if you face like Tampa and you get to the second round and then you face Boston, I mean, that's not fair. But as we've all come to experience, Leafs playoff hockey is never fair. None of the
and we've seen, we've seen teams slay their ultimate dragon before. Remember the Washington Capitals? They could never beat
the Pens.
The Pens were their bully for the longest time, and then in 2018, they scored in overtime. They won, so it gives hope to the underdog Leafs to hopefully follow their footsteps. I like to do something on every loss. I like to kind of try to find the positives. So that's what we're gonna do. So one positive. Now he did allow a tough goal, but Matt Murray made a couple of absolute 10-bell saves, including the first save where he just absolutely robbed Brad Marchand.
Yeah. It's sweeter that way.
Yeah, of course, right?
Absolutely. And he was the rat that didn't score tonight, right? Our rat did. Bunting scored, and Marchand didn't. Especially at the empty netter when Marchand actually brought it into the zone and was trying to pass to Bergeron. If Marchand scored, every single one on the perfection line would have scored. And it would have been of course they did, right? You get the empty netter because that's poetic. And, you know, as a writer, I'm sure that there's a part of you that appreciates that, but it must hurt so much more from a writer's perspective as well.
Well, yeah, you appreciate the bad guys too, right? When you're crafting a story, you put a lot of energy into, you know, the antagonist and who you loathe. Then at some point you come to weirdly respect them. And like, especially someone like Marchand, you know, at this point, he's just been such a consistent pesky presence that it's like, all right, you know, I kind of respect you, dude. Despite everything, you know,
literally giving the devil his due. You're like, darn it. I mean, he did say before the game, Marchand did give credit to the Leafs. He said that, you know, eventually this team is going to break through. They're too talented to break through. And I think all of us should kind of agree with that because this is like this. The Leafs are talented enough to match up with the Bruins. They have the talent to do that, in my opinion. What do you think?
Well, like they're the second best team in the league, you know. Here we are talking like they're the underdogs still, but like they are stacked to the gills, you know. So it's got to happen, and you got to just believe it at this point, you know. Year in and year out, I'm like, oh, you know, keep my expectations low because you know they've blown it so many times. But I'm trying to change my tune this year and be like overly confident and optimistic, almost probably to an annoying degree to like my friends who are fans of other teams. Like, oh yeah, they're gonna do it. They're gonna break through and probably reach at least the conference finals, you know. So
that's the only way to be at this point because
exactly.
You know, we Leaf fans, we're like myself included, we constantly expect the worst all the time because we're never proven wrong. Like it's always like you keep like anytime
what
in
embarrassing
a series, you're
way
like,
can we lose?
What an embarrassing way. And then the reason it's not like we're making this up in our head. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen it on our TVs. It's embedded in our memories. Yeah. So I think maybe going the other way and saying, you know, we are going to slay this dragon. We're going to pass the first round. We're going to beat Boston. That's the way to be, Wob. I appreciate your optimism. I think Leaf fans, we should all be like Wob. And another positive, Austin Matthews is still very good at scoring goals.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk, huh?
Who'd have thunk? Yeah, a couple games off, you know, apparently sick. And they highlighted it on the broadcast when he did that sort of midair sort of bat out of the defensive zone and then ended up
home run.
then ended up scoring on the other side. So yeah, you gotta definitely just praise him regardless. Like just so fortunate that we got him on our team for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I think especially when we have people like that on our team, especially when we haven't had anybody like that in so long, I think it opens the door for new Leaf fans to come in. You know, he is a young guy. He is from a different place in the States, right? And somewhere that not a lot of players have been from, which is, you know, the Southwest. I mean, I know he was born in California, but, you know, he grew up, you know, his mom is from Mexico and he was raised partly in the Mexican culture. And I think that it's good that it's not just another like Ontario dude that's like doing this, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong. Connor McDavid is from like Thornhill, Ontario, right? From Richmond Hill and Newmarket area.
Newmarket,
right?
Yeah.
Newmarket, and he's captain of the Edmonton Oilers, and he's doing great. And it's nice to see some other people, you know, the game slowly opening up in very, 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 very small ways. And you know, hopefully that can continue. I mean, the last time the Leafs won the cup, George Armstrong was the captain of the team, and he was, you know, of a Ojibwe descent, right? So maybe that's what we need to get us back over the hump. Maybe that's what it takes.
And that's what everyone keeps saying. Like all the older guys, like my dad and uncles and all them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I just need a Anishinaabe, you know, captain again, or a coach or something like that," right?
Absolutely.
So those are fewer and farther between these days, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah. And then so another fun little wrinkle with this game was having Wayne Simmons in the lineup. And I kind of forgot that Nick Foligno played for the Boston Bruins, and him and Nick Foligno had an actually amazing fight. Like none of them, it was a draw. And then I love at the end how he just pats him on the head. He's like, it was just, it almost felt like a staged fight in a sense. Like I've never seen two guys punch each other and then be like, all right.
So delicately.
Good. I love you, bud. I love you, man. But and then they cut to Wayne Simmons' day, Mr. Simmons. Wayne Simmons' father looking quite dapper with his fedora and the scarf in the arena. I quite like the look for sure.
Yeah, and he's just kind of like taking it in. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've seen this before. My son throwing bombs, right?"
No big deal.
Yeah.
Barely cracked a smile, right? Which he won the fight. Come on.
I always say, like, I remember when the Leafs had a lot of those veterans when they had Joe Thornton and Spezza and Simmons. They had the grumpy old man line. And I was saying that if you could have like put a time machine and brought one of them from their primes to the Leafs, like as good as Joe Thornton was and as good as Spezza was, man, prime Simmons on the Leafs would just be something to behold for Leaf fans.
Yeah, I'm glad they still put him in the lineup. Like, obviously, he's not as up to speed as he was, even like compared to last year or the year before. But I don't know. He brings like a certain spirit to the squad, and I think he's a fan favorite for sure. And every time he shows up, every time he's in the lineup, we all enjoy it. So hopefully they find a way to keep using him throughout the rest of the season and make some playoff appearances. I hope, anyways.
I think that would be great. And you're right. He does bring a different sort of spirit to the Leafs. They showed a statistic, I think, partway through the second, and the Leafs were actually leading the Bruins in hits, which is not something that has ever been expected in Leafs years past,
weird, eh?
right? Like, I thought that I was seeing things, but no, I took a picture of it, and it was the Leafs had, I think, like 20 hits, and the Bruins only had 12 or something. Which there's a lot of people that say if you're leading hits, then it means you don't have the puck, which was sort of true in this game. But normally they would be playing without the puck and not be throwing those hits, right? Yeah. So I think that it is essential to have somebody like Wayne on the team, and even though he hasn't scored a goal since April 2nd. And Pontus Holmberg scored a week ago. And, on paper, maybe it's a better idea to put the young guy in. I don't think it's a bad thing to get Wayne in a game like tonight against a team like Boston, where there's going to be lots of physicality. Even though Chara is long gone from the Golden Spoke B, there's still the ghost of him that remains. And Charlie McAvoy was, his partner for a long time when he was a young guy. And he sort of continues that legacy on in the Bruins. And it was nice to see the Leafs return that favorite tonight and not just be pushed around like they have earlier in this game. And I think in the playoffs, you're right, especially if they play against Tampa. Regardless of who they face, they're going to need somebody like Wayne Simmons. And it would be unfair to keep him out for half of the season, only to be like, okay, Wayne, game 1 of the playoffs, here you go. You're ready to go crush some bones, right? Like, that's not setting anybody up for success. So do you think they should maybe try and get more of that at the trade deadline?
Yeah, you'd think, who else really is that physical in the lineup though right now? They might need somebody else. I'm not sure exactly who, but that's always been, we've dealt with that as fans, the Leafs being perceived as soft and just not having, that killer instinct or whatever else to get beyond the first round. So, I don't think it'd hurt, but I don't know. Have either of you heard of anybody who may be targeted, for, a bigger body or anything like that?
I think I haven't heard much about like the Grit being targeted this season. Normally it's like this season's been more about like, can they get more scoring, which is kind of like odd to think of this team needing more scoring. But I personally am okay with this, like the defense. And I think the Grit, to me, the Grit's got to have to come from the start players. Like, I don't think you can play a Wayne Simmons 20 minutes a game in the playoffs. He's not that guy anymore. That's just the way it is. Yeah. So when you're talking Grit, you're not going to go and get like a Fraser McLaren or Colton Orr type. I mean, that's a different type of Grit, right?
You're going to go get Nick Foligno.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
Oh Lord, I'm surprised he didn't score tonight. Like that was on my bingo card.
Was it? Did you put a toonie bet down, Fouad? You should have put a
I
toonie
did
bet
not put
down.
a toonie bet down, but I should have, because that would just be like, wow. You know this as a fan, and we have this it's the best 90s sitcom running gag of anything in the league. Is this team giving up goals to these former players?
Yeah.
No matter how obscure or how little they played with the team, it always happens.
Like Nick Ritchie, McCann,
McCann didn't even play.
Leafs legend, Jared McCann.
He didn't even play for the team. He was on the Leafs. He was on the Leafs like on paper contract for that long. Yeah, but to that point, I think if you're gonna go anywhere, the grit's got to come from your star players.
Yeah.
That's the only way. It's not gonna come from low line guys in the fourth line. So
yeah, and you're seeing it a bit at this point in the season. Like, Nylander, not a huge guy, but he's pushing ahead and he's like winning those puck battles. And think about that overtime goal against St. Louis, like totally muscling Tarasenko, right? And then scoring against Bennington. So like that's the kind of gritty play that I like to see. And yeah, Nylander's really stepping up in that sense.
Well, and, Matthews was off the last 2 games, and I think that it really showed in the way that they played defensively, right? I think that they were used to the way he plays because, especially the last 2 seasons, he's really upped his defensive game, and I think that was really evident in the last couple of games where he wasn't playing, and I think not only did they miss their scoring touch, I think they missed the defensive side of it too. So I think I don't know if I have a name like sitting in my brain, but I think that if you're gonna go get somebody, I don't think it would be a bad idea to get somebody that is a left winger that can maybe go into that center slot if it has to go. Because, listen, guys, we've seen the William Nylander at center show. I don't want to subscribe to that channel. No.
Cancel it. First season, it's a Netflix show. Just cancel it after the first season, like they always do. So
cancel it after the pilot.
After the pilot, yeah. Same thing, and the same thing with the Riley Timmins pairing. Yeah, I like both players individually, but the pairing,
just not get together.
Think we saw the pilot. Let's not pick it up.
No network deal after that pilot. That's
no network deal there. So, but Riley, I feel, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this. I feel like Riley is kind of falling into the dreaded space where Leaf fans have for, high profile defensemen. You've seen this for many, many years, going back to, obviously Jake Gardner, going back to Brian McCabe, going back even Larry Murphy, way before my time. So, what do you think of this? Do you think he is struggling right now, but do you think he can turn it around?
I think he can. He's just too talented to not turn it around. He's too experienced to sort of just slump away for the rest of the regular season. Obviously he missed a whole lot of time and they found a gear without him, and they managed to really quick, especially defensively. And that's probably got to be a little bit weird for him too, coming back into the mix and knowing that they were on such a hot streak. But again, he's a veteran and he's probably just got to get his gas tank back in good condition and then, figure out who his natural pairing is with at this point, because I heard on the broadcast he's had 6 different partners since he's come back, which is just wild. And how can you establish any kind of footing, right? But
600 since he's been on the team forever.
Yeah, exactly.
They could never find the pairing for him, right? Going back since he's been on the team since 2012, 2013. So
there was a long time that Ron Hainsey was his best defensive partner.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Good times, right? No. That was rough.
Man.
Then it was but we have a pairing, it seems, with Sandin and Lindgren though. I kind of like that these two guys have come up together. They're of the same age. They were on the Marlies together, growing as their top pair, and now they look like the Leafs top. They look like actually the Leafs top pair this season, which is kind of crazy and pretty promising for two guys that are in their early 20s.
Yeah. Well, especially Giordano probably won't be back next year. And, Brody, who knows how much longer, I don't know how long his contract is for, but.
Oh, he's still signed, but.
Yeah, but we need those young guys for sure. And they're a natural pairing, as you said.
Yeah. So, Wab, I want to get to know a bit more about yourself and, your time as a fan. So what was your kind of first memories watching the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, I just want to say to Fouad and Lauren, thanks a lot for this opportunity. It's super cool to join you guys, and I really like the Game Over franchise that's been created.
Thank you.
It's really fun to see all these shows coming up in each market. But yeah, my fandom really started almost from the beginning. Like, my dad was a huge fan growing up on the Res. We're from Wissahickon First Nation, which is near Parry Sound. And interestingly enough, like when I was growing up in the 80s, we didn't have any hydro or running water in our house, right? So to watch TV, my dad would hook up a little black and white TV to a car battery.
Wow.
You tune the rabbit ears into CBC.
Wow.
So every Saturday we'd be watching the Leafs on this little black and white TV powered by a car battery, right? So eventually we got hydro hooked up at our house when I was probably about 8 or 9. And then the Leafs became a regular viewing. But this is the late 80s when there wasn't a whole lot to cheer about. Like Wendell Clark for sure was the bright spot, right? Like being a high draft pick and coming in as sort of a phenom of sorts. But then there were some dark times towards like 80, 89, 90. But then the Gilmore years happened, and that really just like solidified me as a fan for life, going to, 2 conference finals 2 years in a row. Obviously the high stick from Gretzky and the non-call was.
I wasn't even born. I was not even born, and I felt that.
That's my earliest Leafs memory.
Yeah,
felt it in my soul.
Yeah, like I was 13, I think 13 or 14, and yeah, it was traumatic. But then I moved to Toronto in '98 to go to university, and '98 was another resurgent year. Like they started the year totally hot, and that was they became perennial playoff team after that. So living in Toronto, going through that then was just like, this is my team for life. And yeah, you stick with them after that, right? I moved away from Toronto after that, obviously, and maintained my fandom regardless. And being here in Sudbury now, which is like the home of George Armstrong and Eddie Shack, and some other legendary connections, like Mike Foligno and so on. There's a really strong like Leafs Nation chapter here in Sudbury too, so it feels like being at home for sure.
Well, and you actually wrote an essay a couple of years ago called "The Paradox of Being a Leafs Fan," and I actually read it this evening. And you talk about all of those things. You bring up the memory of like your dad with the rabbit ears and the car battery, and it's as a Leafs fan for me that obviously that grew up in a different situation than you did. That it rightfully is hard to read that was something that you had to go through, and that the Indigenous community, while reparations are slowly attempting to be made by a lot of the things, there's still so far to go. And you say thank you for coming on, or for us inviting you, but I think Fouad and I both want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, absolutely.
And talking about things that aren't necessarily always fun to talk about, right? Like we've had a couple of people on that have broached a couple of difficult subjects that aren't necessarily hockey, but we're all hockey fans, and I think it's important that we try and narrow some of these gaps of understanding where, a few years ago this wasn't something that was being really talked about, and there wasn't a lot of reparations that had been made, and there's still still far to go. But even a couple of weeks ago at the Indigenous reconciliation game, somebody that came, I think, from the same background as you. Is that correct? Tyler is from the same tribe as you, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
he's actually he's my cousin. Actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
That.
Go figure. So
there you go.
It
runs in the family. The fandom runs in the family.
Absolutely, absolutely. But things like that, it makes me very happy to see that other communities are getting the spotlight rightfully now, and hopefully that can continue and grow and be stronger and be more of an everyday thing and not just a once a year game.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. Like it's something I grew up loving, the game of hockey. But also like when I was a kid, like I recognized my distance from it at the same time, being an outsider, hearing racial slurs for the first time on the ice. And I think you know, when you consider the three of us, you know, we could be considered three people from so-called marginalized communities, right? But
Yeah.
we share this same compassion for this game. And in some ways, like we overcome a lot of those difficulties to create community and to celebrate each other and, you know, find this bond over this game and this team that, you know, has let us down many times, but we find camaraderie amongst ourselves regardless, right? So like there's a beauty in that despite some of those difficulties, and that, you know, needs to be celebrated for sure.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get your thoughts too. They like, how did you like? What was your kind of reaction when they had the kind of like Indigenous celebration night, the Toronto Maple Leafs? Like, how did you?
And what did you think of the jersey? Obviously,
Yeah.
you have bias because your cousin designed it. But
Yeah. It's just.
Oh, I thought it was awesome. You know, that's something I could have never imagined happening when I was like a little kid, just, you know, becoming a Leafs fan. And really, that's something that's only happened within the last, you know, 3, 4, 5 years in other Canadian markets too, right? Like in this era, that's come to be known as reconciliation. So it's really great. I think that, you know, the league and especially the Canadian franchises are recognizing the Indigenous communities in their cities and the contributions those communities make and so on. And, you know, really showcase the beauty of the art and the creativity. And I think just the vibrancy of different Indigenous cultures, especially in a city like Toronto, it's really cool to see, right? So yeah, the jersey was awesome. I wanted to like get at least one of those T-shirts, but like I clicked on the shop site,
Gone
right
they
away.
had to
right?
actually pull the advertisement down because they sold out so quickly. Which
No kidding.
I can't
Yeah.
believe that they didn't have the foresight to, I don't know.
List hosting Up North is it, I believe it's called, and you know you kind of stepped away from that to work on your career as a novelist. You released your book Under the Crusted Moon.
Moon of the Crescent Snow. Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I
okay.
completely. I'm so sorry, but
National bestseller.
national bestseller.
Moon of the
So
Crescent Snow.
what inspired you to become a novelist?
I think it was really the storytelling culture that I grew up in. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up with without TV and you know, without the internet, obviously. So, you know, in our community, there was a lot of time we spent together, learning about culture and learning about stories. And back in the 80s, that was kind of rare because, you know, it was a renaissance of sorts for us. It was a way for us to get back in touch with our culture after obviously residential schools and the Indian Act and so on, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in a time when our community was really working hard to reconnect with storytelling, especially. So I had that shown to me as, you know, a viable expression, you know, a creative outlet and so on. And I sort of carried that through the rest of my life. And I ended up going to university for journalism because I didn't know how to, you know, be a creative writer, right? Like I wasn't sure how to become a novelist, even though that was my dream. So I ended up working for CBC mostly. But all the while I was doing this creative writing on the side, like as a hobby. And I was fortunate to be able to get a book published, my first one published about 12 years ago.
You've written three, I think, right? Three books?
Yeah, three, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, it wasn't those first couple books weren't bestsellers at all, but you know, the response was pretty good, and people were really encouraging for me to keep it going. And my last book, Moon of the Crusted Snow, it ended up, you know, becoming a bestseller, and I sort of had to make the decision to step away from CBC in order to keep writing, right? So it was a tough decision at first, but it worked out really well for me, fortunately. And I'm working on the sequel to Moon of the Crusted Snow right now. It's called Moon of the Turning Leaves, and it's going to be out in the fall through Penguin Random House. So so that's big, exciting development I got coming up later in the year.
There you go. Well, make sure everybody pre-orders that book wherever you can get it, and we're looking forward to it. And we want to thank you again for coming on, Bob. Honestly, we wish it was a Leafs win, but we're glad it was an exciting game with a lot of different storylines to talk about. So again, so happy to have you, and we're good luck on your project, and we hope to hear from you very soon.
Thanks, Al, for having me on. You know, this is super fun. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. So for myself, my name is Fouad Suleiman. You can find me on Twitter at Fouad_sports. Lauren?
My name is Lauren. You can find me on Twitter at Lauren in the Six. Wob, go ahead, pump your new book, pump your Twitter handle. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you.
You have the
You
floor.
can find me on Twitter at Wob. That's at WAUB. You can find me on Instagram at the same handle as well, at WAUB. On Facebook, Wob Gijek Rice. And again, the new book is called Moon of the Turning Leaves. It'll be out in the fall. And Moon of the Crescent Snow is actually on the long list for CBC's Canada Reads this year. So, yeah, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens there.
Well,
There you go.
Congratulations again, and best of luck with the new book. And hopefully, maybe if we have some playoff success, maybe we can have you on again later this season.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you again
well,
for coming on tonight. Thank you, everybody, for watching Game Over Toronto. I am Lauren once again, Fouad, my co-host, and Wob for coming on tonight. Everybody have a great night. Stay warm. Take care, Leaf fans. We'll see you soon.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.